One day, David Cameron was having a perfectly normal Prime Minister morning. His tea was warm, his podium was shiny, and the old cupboard marked Europe was still making strange noises in the hallway. The cupboard had been there for years. Sometimes it rattled about trade. Sometimes it coughed up forms about borders. Sometimes it quietly ate a biscuit and blamed regulations. David looked at the cupboard, looked at the country, and decided what this situation really needed was one tiny ballot box. Oh dear. And so, on June 23, 2016, the United Kingdom was asked whether it wanted to remain in or leave the European Union. A very large question was folded into a very small square, which is exactly how politics makes furniture nervous. At first, David met a cheerful little puppet called Simple Answer. Simple Answer said the box would make everything clear. Leave would mean leave. Remain would mean remain. The cupboard would finally stop wheezing during breakfast. Which sounded lovely, until David noticed Simple Answer had brought no measuring tape, no moving plan, no spare screws, and absolutely no idea how wide the hallway was. Time to move on. Then David met two campaign puppets standing on opposite biscuit tins. One wore a leave-colored rosette and promised the club door could be opened without disturbing the plumbing. The other wore a remain-colored rosette and warned that the plumbing was, in fact, most of the house. Both puppets waved very big feelings. Both had very tiny instruction manuals. One manual had a drawing of a door. The other had a drawing of a flood. Neither had a chapter called, "What Happens Tuesday Morning?" Meanwhile, real voters arrived with different worries, hopes, jokes, anger, boredom, bills, passports, factory badges, family histories, and suspiciously confident uncles. This is important. No single Clay voter caused Brexit. Millions of people pressed the same little button for different reasons. When the counting was finished, Leave had 51.9%, and Remain had 48.1%. That meant 17,410,742 votes for Leave and 16,141,241 votes for Remain, because democracy enjoys suspense with commas. Turnout was about 72.2%, which is a lot of shoes for one little box. England and Wales leaned Leave. Scotland and Northern Ireland leaned Remain. The island immediately became a group project with 4 different handwriting styles. David looked at the result. The tiny box looked back. It had done exactly what it was built to do. It had counted the answer. Unfortunately, the answer did not come with Allen keys. So David announced he would step down because he had opened the cupboard and discovered it was full of homework. Back went the shiny podium, down went the shoulders, out came the papers. After that, the country met Theresa May, who arrived with a serious folder, sensible shoes, and Article 50 tucked under one arm like a spell written by a committee. On March 29, 2017, the UK formally notified the European Council that it intended to leave the European Union under Article 50. The clock began ticking politely, which is the most British kind of panic. Theresa tried to move the cupboard through the hallway, but every shelf had a question on it. Trade had elbows, borders had elbows, services had elbows, even cheese appeared to have elbows. Then she stumbled upon the Irish border question, which was sitting very quietly with a sharp little needle. Maps are calm until real roads touch them. Then they become less like maps and more like family arguments with lorries. So Theresa went to Parliament, where the benches had become a puppet theatre. Papers rose, deadlines moved, votes appeared, disappeared, and returned wearing a different hat. The curtain kept going up on the same scene, except each time everyone looked a little more tired. The little ballot box stayed on the shelf, looking like office equipment with diplomatic immunity. Time to move on again. Then the story met Boris Johnson, who arrived with tousled clay hair and a bright button that seemed to say, The whole job could be finished if everyone simply pressed it hard enough. The button looked confident. The papers did not. Eventually, after extensions, arguments, speeches, resignations, warnings, votes, and enough paper to scare a forest, Brexit happened. The UK left the European Union on January 31st, 2020, then entered a transition period while everyone kept discovering extra drawers inside the drawer. This was the special magic of the cupboard. Every time someone found a handle, it became a form. Every time someone found a form, it became a meeting. Every time someone found a meeting, it asked for a subcommittee and a biscuit. Along the way, the story met a customs desk, who wore a tiny visor and spoke entirely in blank labels. The desk said everything would be fine, as long as every truck, parcel, sandwich, fish, cheese, and mysterious box of bolts knew exactly which queue it belonged in. Then the story met a services spreadsheet, who was very pale and had not slept since the word access entered the room. It had neat little cells for finance, data, qualifications, workers, clients, rules, exceptions, and several things no one wanted to explain before lunch. After that came the fishing crate, which had spent years being small, symbolic, and extremely photogenic. Everyone pointed at it with great seriousness, because tiny boats make excellent political props. The fish, being fish, declined to provide a constitutional settlement. Then came the airport queue, which had 2 suitcases, 3 opinions, 1 delayed flight, and a family trying to remember whether the new rules lived in an app, a stamp, a website, or a drawer inside the drawer. David watched all this from back near the tea. Theresa watched from under a stack of folders. Boris watched the button continue to look pleased with itself. The cupboard, which had caused no speeches of its own, somehow became heavier. Some people celebrated. Some people mourned. Many people did both, depending on the headline, the bill, the queue at the airport, and whether the news had used the word friction before breakfast. Back at the old cupboard, David's tea had gone cold. The hallway was narrower than advertised. The ballot box was still tiny, and the country had learned that a yes or no sticker is not the same thing as an instruction manual. Because the little box had answered one question. It had not packed the plates. It had not labeled the fragile trade bits. It had not explained customs forms to the cheese. It had not explained services access to the tiny, worried spreadsheet. It had not explained the crumb policy to the biscuits. That was the job of humans, which is usually where the furniture gets stuck. And somewhere behind the forms, flags, rosettes, emergency tea bags, and heroic little paper clips, a tiny note still says, maybe measure the hallway first. Because once the cupboard is wedged, every expert in the house suddenly becomes very interested in doors. And that, children, is how one tiny box answered one question and accidentally became a storage unit for the future.